welcome to AMASV podcast episode 8 featuring our guest Maria Costen. My name is Haneti Kraja and I'm the Vice President of VP of Records at AMASV. Maria is our guest today, as I mentioned, and she's a seasoned marketer with many years of experience. She is a media professional and a self-starter, pushing her career forward using her intuition and her own drive. And she is pretty amazing, so I can't wait for us to hear more about her experience. So welcome, Maria.
Hello, Nettie. Thanks so much. Oh my God, I have little tears already for that. But thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Of course, thanks for being here. So I'd like to ask you about your background in marketing and what sort of work you do now.
Sure. So I'm from New York originally, and I actually started. Ever since I was young, I knew I wanted to get into business, right? I mean, I don't know how I did, but I just, I come from a family of teachers, which is awesome. And I've actually incorporated that into my leadership style of being teaching and coaching. But I always wanted to get into business, particularly the analytic side of it and the numbers side of it and understanding, the why behind it. And so I decided to get into business and marketing. And I have my degree from Pace University in New York. And initially I was into retail management. I didn't really like that so much, but as I started doing more research, and you're going to kind of hear that as a theme, as I started talking to my professors and my guidance counselors and trying to figure out, okay, what I wanted to do, that exploration is actually fun for me. Like with some people, it's like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. But for me, it was like, let me see, what's available, right? And I found out about advertising, and it was like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. I don't really know much about it besides seeing the commercials on TV. And I found out that there was an internship that my school had posted for the American Association of Advertising Agencies. And at the time, they had a minority track because I think I mentioned to you at the time when I was in school, there were actually more Black doctors, which is crazy. Then there were Blacks in advertising, and they were trying to use this internship as a way to, I guess, better, like, even the playing field, right? Have access, like, because it was obvious that we were all really smart, but we didn't really have access to how to get into advertising. And it was really funny because I'm in sales and media now, but I remember when I applied for it, it was too late. But somebody said, you know what? The deadline is passed, but apply anyway. Best advice. It's just like, okay, so I applied anyway. And the person that had answered the phone, because it was phone then, it said, oh, it's too late, but we'll put your application on file just in case somebody drops out, right? But just stay in touch. But she was kind of rude, but she was like, just stay in touch. So every week I would just call her. At the time we had like long lead time. So if it was a summer internship, this was probably, I don't know, January or December. So every week I would call her. And then one time I noticed that her tone changed because normally she says, no, we don't have any openings. And she would just hang up the phone. But this last time, maybe it was like the sixth time I called, she's like, well, hello, Maria. Thank you so much for calling, right? That frequency. She said, we had somebody drop out. Are you interested? And I'm like, yes, that's why I keep calling you. And it just shows me that you just never know. And that was kind of how I was able to experience advertising as an intern to see if this is what I wanted for a career. So we had to pick what we wanted. I was never really into creative because when people think of advertising, they think of the commercials. So I wasn't in that part. And then account management is where the strategy happens. And you needed to have an MBA for that. So kind of by default, I ended up in media planning and analytics, which was perfect for my background because it's like, oh, I love this. This is great. So I was exposed to all the creativity, but I was actually working on the analytics piece. And so I did that as an intern, and I was able to segue that into getting a job at, one of the best agencies, great advertising in New York, working on consumer packaged goods brands. And so from there, I came to San Francisco where I was hired by another agency. And so, my career has pretty much stayed in different parts of advertising and media to where I am now. It is just so amazing how everything has, I can't even say full circle. I just feel like I have worked in every kind of aspect of advertising and marketing and media in my career. So I feel pretty lucky.
Mm-hmm. That's really inspiring. And that sort of exploration sort of aspect to it is sort of what you're supposed to do. And that's kind of what we're doing at the AMASV podcast is exploring different areas of the marketing communications industry and seeing what it's all about. But it's interesting that you were able to like touch sort of every piece of it and not limit yourself to only one certain specialty.
Right, exactly, because you just don't know. I mean, I always tell young people, everybody says it's great to work for a big company, right? And so I've had that experience in New York at jail, and it's great. I mean, it's really great, particularly when you're starting out, because people kind of tell you what to do and you have a path, and it's almost like you can't really fail because you have so many people who are kind of managing you and you're kind of working on it as a team, which is great. But then as you go on your career, you kind of want more autonomy. You want to see more of the bigger picture, which is why I moved out to California because the agencies are smaller. And then I worked into more independent agencies where, because they're smaller, you pretty much have to do everything. And you get to learn all of that. And so that may not be for everybody, but I like the idea of being at a large agency where you're kind of like a small piece of the cog, but a great cog. And then you get to learn, and then you get to take that knowledge to help smaller companies that don't have that money or expertise, as the $1 million companies or $1 billion companies do.
Hmm. Yeah, there's times where companies find that star candidate that they want to hire because they come with like a great background like yours.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the reasons why I was able to get out to San Francisco was it was kind of known that the New York advertising agencies do really great training. So when you come to San Francisco, where it's smaller, you're already trained, and so you're able to come in and hit the ground running, which is exactly what happened to me. So the advice that I got from other friends that did that is exactly what I happened. So I was able to get promoted in San Francisco because now I knew a lot, and I was able to manage a team that didn't have the same, experience that I did coming from New York.
Yeah, that's amazing. And tell me a little bit more about your experience now and what you like about it.
So it's really interesting because when I started out, I was, working in advertising agencies, right? And so, as you probably know, being in marketing, advertising agencies have changed a lot, right? They used to be full service, and so they handled everything for clients, right? You take a Ford or any company, and they hire an advertising agency, and you do the strategy work, then you work on the media part, which is what I did, the creative, you put it all together, you spend the money. But a lot of agencies are different. Like some of them focus on digital, some of them focus on experiential, some of them just do media planning. So there's a lot of different components. And one of the things I think we talked about is I'm always looking 2 steps ahead. Like
Hmm.
whatever I'm doing, I love what I'm doing, but I'm like, okay, where else can I go? Because you just never know. Marketing, particularly now in this time, things are changing really fast, and you don't want to be left not understanding where you fit as things are changing. So as I saw the agencies starting to change, I always in the back of my head thought about being in media, right? Because when I was media director or when I worked in the media department, media salespeople would come to our department, right? Whether it's TV, radio, out of home, print, and they would give us their analysis of why they should be on the media plan. Because remember, I was evaluating media. So I got a chance to meet all these great people, and I didn't see them as vendors because I think that's very like interchangeable. I saw them as experts for their particular product. And my job was to talk to all of the experts and come to myself, well, what was best for my client, right? Because the client was paying me to make the best decision. And I would do all the analysis and the research, and then I would come up with a plan. And unfortunately, everybody couldn't be on the plan, but I'd always call and say, thank you so much, but you were too high, you were too this, you weren't right for this. And I always made sure that I could see the big picture, right? So then as I was going into it, I said, well, it would be great to work for a media company because I love talking. I feel like I'm pretty persuasive. I like the idea of deep diving into one thing. So when you work in media, which is I do now, you're an expert on your particular product that you're selling, and you're talking with my clients, which are advertisers, and trying to convince them why my product is better than my competition. And since I've been doing that all my life, it's just so much fun. But now I just do it for one company, whether it's radio or if it's TV. And I get to meet all these great people. And now instead of being an expert in auto or an expert in CPG, I'm an expert in my product. And I get to work on all those great brands. So I get to meet a lot of different people and find out about a lot of different industries, which I love.
Yes, and I just want you to know, I just love your energy. Like I could just tell you take that with you every single day, and this is something you're like extremely passionate about. And it's like from the perspective of an early marketer, it just makes the future look even brighter. So thank you for your passion about
Oh,
that.
you're welcome. And you never want to lose that passion. And, I can't say that I've always had it, but when I do start to lose it, I know that I'm not in the right place. And it's not always the company. Sometimes it could be the team that you're working with. Sometimes it could be, we were talking about championing for yourself. I mean, I think that's one thing that's really important, to understand, okay, what are your weaknesses? What are your strengths? But really understanding yourself and what environment do you need to be in, whether it's people or company, that's going to bring the best out of you. And how can you bring the best out of you? Because I was always afraid to go into sales. It's interesting that you said that, because I was like, how can you be on all the time? Like all the salespeople that come, like they were always so perky and they would take me out to lunch. And they were like, we're not like this all the time. We're only like this when we're, in front of clients, but we have downtime when we're doing research and we're able to like unwind. And that's but when we're, on, we're on. And so I'm like, yeah, I think I could do that. And it was wonderful advice.
Yeah, it is good advice. And I also I think it's a good point that you made where you look at vendors as experts in their product, and it establishes the like partnership more so as a partnership rather than someone else working for you.
Oh, absolutely. And that's so great that you say that, because that's what I would do. I would call, my media partners, which I like to call them, and say, hey, we have this new campaign that's coming out. I can't give you all the details, but come up with some ideas for me that I can present to my team. And, they would. And so usually the ones that had the best ideas are the ones that I chose. And so I model myself as, a media partner now on that. Like I always tell people, like, just don't look at me as a vendor. If you have something you're coming up with, I'm very creative. I'll come up with ideas. I even give them ideas beyond just the media that I work for, because I'm still able to look at the big picture. And then a lot of times I will get the business because I took the time to brainstorm internally, some different ideas. I don't always get the business, but I feel that the relationship that I've built with the person is invaluable, because they're like, okay, next time I have something, I'm going to come to Maria because I know that she's going to help me think outside the box.
Yeah, it does make all the difference when the two sides are working well together and like work sort of on the same playing field and understand each other. That's from my
Mm-hmm.
experience, at least.
Yes, definitely.
So I know that from our previous conversation, one important thing too is like allowing the early marketers to understand like what marketing is. So, what is the definition of marketing to you?
So it's interesting that you asked that. So I kind of looked up some definitions, and then I have my definition too as well. The definition of marketing could be the process of getting people interested in your company's product or service, right? So interest, like that's very vague, right? Or the science and art of exploring, creating, and delivering value to satisfy the needs of a target market. So that's a little bit more, because it's definitely science and it's definitely art. And when I was in school, we would go back to the 4 Ps, right? Because that's kind of like the basics of marketing, because both of those definitions, they're really kind of focused on one part of the marketing mix, but really so product or service, that's really kind of the key, because that is really what you're marketing. You're marketing something. You're marketing a car. You're marketing a behavior change. And so in addition to the product, it's important to understand, that's the first P, the relationship that the target audience has to the product or service, right? So product and target audience to me is the most important part of marketing. And then after that, you look at the second P, which is called place, right? And that's distribution. How do you get the product, right? Is it online? Is it direct to consumer? Do you have to go to, a manufacturer like a Safeway or a Macy's? How is the consumer going to get the product? Because that will determine, how you market it, right? And then of course, price, like how are you going to price it? Is it going to be free as added value? Is it going to be premium? Is it going to be, a product that everybody could purchase, right? And then the part that I'm, of course, the most focused on is promotion. How are you going to get the word out? But you can't really get into promotion, which is what I focused on, until you understand your product, your placement, and your price, right? And so they all kind of work together. And so, as you can imagine, there's a lot of strategy, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of understanding that goes on. And small companies don't always, have the money, but there's different things you can do that's maybe not that expensive, like grandfather research, just asking people. Like with the whole, world right now, there's so much research that's at your hands that you can get and not have to pay a lot of money for, which is like amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So what's your definition of marketing?
Okay, well, that's a really good question. So, as you know, I'm very early into the industry, but I think my definition of marketing would be similar to what you said. I don't have all the key fundamentals in my back pocket yet, but my definition of marketing would be like grasping the consumer's attention towards your
Mhm.
product and like advertising it in a way that they like believe in you and believe in your product. And this is a big thing that I looked at during the pandemic when a lot of well, first of all, a lot of agencies and companies and like corporate like offices had to shift their strategy entirely. But also like national brands, I've noticed. Like I saw commercials, and some of them were just like basically talking to the consumer, being like, "We're in the same spot that you are. Like we're also staying home, and we also don't know what's going on, and we also don't know what to do." So there was one really significant one to me, and it was from Dove, who has a line of soap. They have hair care products, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like one big ad that they put out there that really stood out to me was, "We don't care what kind of soap you use, just wash your hands."
Awesome.
Yeah, and so to me, like that was true marketing. Like it was like understanding the consumer, but also understanding like the team behind the product. It's like
Mhm,
that
mhm.
they're also real people who, who
Right.
who also use the product or have to like use something like the product in their everyday lives, and like they just put their whole heart into that one like ad and just like put it out there, and I still remember it to this day like 2 3 years
Awesome.
later. So that's true marketing to me, I think.
That's great. I love that. Thank you.
There was another Jack in the Box one where it was like they were trying to advertise a new sandwich, and they said something in their commercial like, "You like this, ignore like the old image like of our sandwich." Like, and they said something like that. I need to find it and send it to you, but
Yeah, please.
it was something like, "We literally can't create a new ad right now because it's a pandemic."
They just kind of repurpose. Oh, I love that. That's so funny.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm going there. I'm gonna be supporting you forever because you're honest. So true marketing to me is honest marketing, and I know from your experience that's a lot of similar things that you've done.
Yeah, it is, and it's kind of like looking at who your target is. So I don't think we talked about this, but are you familiar with the TV show Mad Men?
Yeah.
It came out 2008, and
Mhm.
so I mean, of course, everybody in the industry was obsessed about it, right? Because it was in the 60s. But what I loved what they did because they knew there was a lot of industry people that were watching. They matched the commercials to the ads. So like Mercedes or BMW didn't just take like an ad from today. They either repurposed the vintage ad from the 60s or they made their commercial look vintage. And to me, that was so smart because it was seamless. So you'd watch this TV show and you would go right into the commercial, but still have that same feel to it,
Yeah.
right? And I just thought that that was like so genius, to be able to do that.
Yeah, especially if they know when the ad is gonna go on TV after the episode of Mad Men or during. It's like you never like stop watching the episode. I love that.
Right. And it was all synergy. So the person that, created Mad Men and AMC, they knew that. And so they went and they pitched it and they said, if you want to advertise in this show, you have to do this. Like they wouldn't accept advertising otherwise. So it was like, and a lot of times we don't realize all this stuff is planned, but it was planned. And so when you're watching it as a consumer, you're understanding, oh my God, this is so amazing. And it just has more of an impact. And I think that's why it was such a phenomenon because that level of detail that happens in marketing behind the scenes that people don't even realize.
Yeah, it's like, they really, really read their audience and like,
Yes.
oh, that's why I work in marketing. Like it's truly marketing to me. I love that. Oh my gosh. So, like marketers learn a lot like in their careers, and one important thing is learning soft skills. So, what kind of soft skills do you think are important for a marketer or any professional to have?
So soft skills, I'd say a combination of, having a curious mind, I think is probably the best soft skill to have. And so what I mean by curious mind is that, if you're working, with somebody who is like, this is what they're asking you to do, I would just question it, not questioning in a negative way, but just if you have the right kind of managers, they'll explain to you why they're asking you to do what you're doing. And I've always been so lucky that I've had bosses that were like that. And part of it, I think, is by design because I've always liked to work for multiple bosses. So this is a tip that I have to say because sometimes you just don't jive with your boss for whatever reason. And I did have that situation when I first started out. But the great thing about it is I had three bosses, right?
Yeah.
So the one guy, we didn't really hit it off. I don't know why, but the other two was great. So whatever he said negative about me was discounted by the other two. But he was one of the ones, maybe he was just really busy or whatever. So he would never want me to ask questions. So it was kind of like, well, just do it, right?
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, fine. And then I would ask the other, why, what's the thinking behind it? And so I was able to kind of understand. And so I think being curious about what you do is going to help you because you can put it in context. You can come up with things beyond what people are asking you to do. Like you give them what they're asking them. You know what? I thought this could be great because this is what we're trying to do. And so thinking again beyond what they're asking you, I think is invaluable as a soft skill. Like you never want to be that person, but they asked you for like one paragraph and you just gave one paragraph. Like you want to do two paragraphs because you're so excited after you did the one, right? You want to go further on. Ask a lot of questions if it's appropriate. Like you have to be able to read the room and you have to, be able to like maybe in a meeting is not the time to be curious. Maybe
Mhm.
you put your questions and you do it on one. But again, you have to be able to read the timing of when you need to ask questions or whatever it is that you're thinking of. And then I would listen, with my whole entire body and then really say, okay, what does this mean? Like, what do I not understand? Who can I go to that won't yell at me, to ask the questions, right? So all those are things are like kind of soft skills, right? Because as you're getting this information, you're trying to think of, okay, I don't understand this. What do I do next? And I think a lot of times, sometimes when people are younger in a career, like I remember me, you get kind of paralyzed, right? And it's not like you're procrastinating. You just don't know what to do and you don't know like how to get to the next step. And so I remember reading about procrastination because I'm procrastinating all the time. And they said, well, you know what procrastination is not? Procrastination is not when you don't know what to do something, that means you need to get more information. Procrastination is when you know what to do and you just don't do it for whatever reason, right? So most of us, it's really important when you're particularly starting out, you write notes up, don't know what this is, question mark, do know this. And then you can kind of figure out, okay, how to move it forward based on what you know and what you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like it really resonates me when you make that point because like it's not only like earning a degree, like having the skills to do the job, understanding what marketing is, et cetera, et cetera. It's learning how to work in the industry because a lot of people work very differently. And I did something similar where I worked with some interns at my career agency. And so, I had them do some projects for me. So, like, before I asked them to do anything, I'd be like, hey, so, like, earned media is media that we don't necessarily pay for, but we pitch out to media outlets, and we receive coverage back, and we track metrics for a certain reason, and we track which region earned media aired in, and that's what earned media is. Now, can you can you help me move forward with this project? Because like it is possible to do your own investigating research on your own, but it really, really helps if you have someone who has that level of expertise, tell you directly sometimes. And I just feel like it helps people to be like better professionals in the end if they sort of have like that like perspective of someone else who knows like
Right.
more than they do. Yeah.
No, that's so important, and that's so great that you did that. Not everybody will take the time to explain, and so it's great, for you to be able to offer that, explanation because a lot of times, again, not meaning to be mean, but I think the advertising agency world is just so fast paced that people don't always have time to give you that level of explanation, which is why sometimes they send people out without knowing what to do, and it's like, okay, what do I do? I could just remember that feeling like I'm sitting at my desk, like and then we're both like looking and then we can kind of come up with a game plan but it's like we don't really know how to move forward but we figured it out, right? And sometimes that's exciting too, like when you kind of, oh, I got this, or sometimes you make a mistake but it's all part of the learning process, right?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know like what like you've learned from your experience of going through those phases throughout your career and now being at, such a like you have like you're at such a high level in your career and have that sort of understanding of the industry.
So for me, I think it's really important to also understand yourself, right? And so when you know that you're in the right position, like it's using your skill set, I think it's easier. Okay, so one of my so three of my strengths, and I don't know if you've never done Strength Finder, make sure that you do it. Context, input, and strategy. So those are three of my five, right? And so it's important for me to understand the background of something in order to move forward. And then that's really where sometimes it gets into like when I'm starting to do my why questions, I can see that people start to get frustrated sometimes because they just want me to work on the project. So I have learned how to get that information without bothering that person, right? And so, for instance, to give you an example, when I was a media assistant, we would have to do a lot of reach and frequencies and like plans, right? And so we would have to do like different media, and then you have to, combine them for reach and frequency. And so I would stay at work like pretty much all night, and I would do different scenarios of the reach and frequencies in the computer room. So I understood, okay, so if I do this, then this happens. If I do that, that happens. I did that on my own so I could really understand it. And then I remember one time when the computer broke, I had all my things and I was able to replicate it based on my understanding. Everyone's like, what? How do you know that? Because I took my time to understand what is the reach of outdoor versus the reach of this. And then I put it together. So that was like my learning. And so because I knew that I have to understand the background, I just use it on my own time. And then people are always amazed at that. So but that's my expertise. And so other people may be really good at writing. Writing was like never my strength. And so I would just shine with whatever you can and try to look for projects and positions that really make you shine with your strengths. So since analytics and all that, so I always got those, projects like, Maria, can you do this analysis? Can you do this? Can you do this paper on why we should do this versus another? Because that was my strength. And so it's great when you have a boss that understands that. And I remember one thing you saying, being a self-starter. I remember doing all my work like really quickly and not having anything else to do. And I would go to the planners and say, well, we don't have anything else. And so I would do these like papers like for my team. And I remember my boss said, well, if you have time to do that, we need to put you on more projects, because he appreciated me being a self-starter and he realized that I didn't have enough to do, right?
That's
So
always
I
good to
love
know.
that.
Yeah, it's always good to be self-motivated and like show what you can do outside of your like day-to-day tasks.
Right, particularly when somebody doesn't really have time. And I always hear that I don't have time to train, but I always make time, now my job now, we have assistants and it was the same thing. And I just had a Zoom call and I said, well, how are things going? And like, I'm so overwhelmed. It's like, blah, blah, blah. And so I just gave him tips on, how to organize. And like, he doesn't report to me, but sometimes that's even better when you could talk to somebody that, doesn't report to you, because they could be more honest. Because you don't want to go to your boss and say, I'm overwhelmed. They're like, well, maybe this isn't the job for you, right? So again, you have to pick like who you talk to about somebody that you could trust and that could help you. That's another tip.
Yeah, one thing I learned to do is to network within my own agency. Like I started my job maybe 2 years ago at this point, and so I took the time to meet people I don't work directly with, and I've had other people do the same to me. So it's like people get to know you, and then especially when they see you in person, they're like, "Oh, hey, we've talked before, even though we never had a reason to." So that's like something that I've learned is a strength of mine.
That's really good. And then if you kind of keep that going, so the job that I'm in now, I've been there for 3 years. And so even though I'm a seasoned professional, I still did the mentorship program that I was the mentee, because everybody's been here for like 25 years. So 3 years is like a baby. And she was in another department in LA, and it was so great because I felt like I could tell her what's going on, and she didn't know the people, and so she can kind of give me advice from like a high level. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like so awesome, like to be able to see things. And I'm like, if I was you, this is what I would do. And it was just a really great kind of like 6-month relationship. And so companies that have those kind of programs that are kind of like curated, I would say take advantage of those. The mentorships, like any kind of professional development that you can do while you're working is invaluable, and it's a great asset, for the companies.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned like some things that you did, growing throughout your career and things that you learned to do. When do you feel like you became successful in your career?
So I've always felt successful, ever since the beginning, because as I said, like I've always looked at the next step. And so even when I started as an assistant media planner, right? I mean, well, even as an intern, the internship was really interesting because I have to say, I don't necessarily if I would call that successful at the time because I was so new and I didn't know. And then kind of going back to, they didn't have time. Like I could see that the people that I were working with were annoyed at having
Mhm.
to have an intern. And it's something that kind of happens. It's like, oh my God, this person doesn't know anything. They're just gonna like suck my time, right? So there wasn't really much for me to do in the company, but I had my other trainings. But then they hired an assistant media planner and I became her assistant. And we were kind of learning together. And it was like so much fun. And I stayed in contact with her for a really long time because she was like, I need help. And so she would get the information from her planner and then she would like we would work on it together. And that was really enjoyable. And I learned that process of us learning together. So that was like first thing like, okay, I can do this. I can go from a situation that could have been negative, right? Where nobody was giving me anything to do to now I'm working very closely with an assistant media planner who just started. And then, being able to get that next job as, what she was doing, an assistant media planner with her being my mentor, that to me is a success, right? Because for me, I was always able to overcome the obstacles or predict the obstacles and overcome them to the next level of what I wanted to do. And so throughout my career, it's always been that way. Like I've been able to kind of pivot. I have to say there was probably, one looking back position that I took. I only stayed a year and it was a startup. But interesting enough, it was an internet video company. And I feel like I went to that company too soon. Like sometimes I feel when I'm thinking that I'm not successful, it's like I think that I'm seeing things before other people get it. Like, people are like talking about digital right now, but digital really kind of like in the 90s, right? And so I was kind of on that early wave. And when you try to present something to somebody that they don't understand, they immediately say no. But I don't look at that as failure. I'm just, oh, it's just not the right time. I have to figure out with my trust and then trusting me that eventually they're going to trust me when I try to point them in a new direction, but they don't see it. But if they trust me, they will. And so when I started having that trust in myself, I have to say that's when I really felt successful because I looked in the past. And if everybody doesn't feel successful, you should really look at all the things that you have been successful because that's an exercise I always do too. Like if I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm failing, like, but look at all these successes. Why can't I pivot this situation just like I pivoted those situations? Because you always remember the end of something. Like when you were successful, you don't remember necessarily how you got there, right? And if you remember that process, then it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get there again, right? This is like I just have to maybe work a little bit harder or talk to a few more people, or maybe it's not worth it. Maybe I need to just move on to the next, right? Which is what I did with that particular job. But it was like, okay, there wasn't, nobody knew the company. It was really hard sell. And it's so funny because I stayed in contact with those people. We were trying to call it Clorox, right? And
Yeah.
she was, and then they were looking at us like we had two heads, like, you don't understand, like, because it was kind of like a product that was a combination of creative and media. It was doing these. Remember when the viral videos were really big and they were very organic? So I went to a company that's what we sold, and we had producers, camera people all around the world. So if you wanted to do like a video in China or London, we would just call our people and we wouldn't have to fly people. But people didn't really understand it. And so after I left the company, I want to say like a year later, I talked to my old boss. He said, Maria, we just closed the Clorox account. And I'm like, what? It just took a year and a half. But I was like, so that was my win. Even though I was no longer with the company, the fact that something closed when I was there and he told me about it, I'm like, oh, that's great.
Yeah. That's really inspiring. Like, looking back and seeing where you can achieve success again. And that, like, point of believing in yourself is just like everyone needs to have some of that. So, and it just really like proves why you are so successful to this day and do something that you love because you never gave up.
Right, you don't give up, and then you just keep trying. And I mean, I have so many stories like that. It's just so much fun. And then I always said, like, even if you don't sell the person or not able to do it, I've had so many friendships of people that are just become my friends, real friends outside of work because we just like each other. We're both in the same industry, and it's just a fun business. So you're in the right career path.
Thank you. Yeah, especially volunteering with AMA, it's just really inspiring to have people who like enjoy the same type of work that I do, and like I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like we're on the same level, and me and Christine, our VP of programming, who you spoke to, it's just like I would kind of say we can finish each other's sentences. That's like how similar we think. So it's just great having friends in the industry.
That's really good. And then also go back to your question of when I felt successful. I've always been good, and you are like this too, I could tell. I always show up, right? Because you got to show up. Like, even if you're scared, if you're nervous, if you don't know exactly what to do. And I used to be terrified of public speaking, but I would always show up, right? But I feel like I became really successful when my inside matched my outside, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like I love speaking now. I love doing different things. Like, whenever my boss asks me, do I want to do this new project? I'm like, yes, because I love exploring new things now that I've been doing this for a while. And so I enjoy it. Well, like, some people may make it nervous. They don't want to get embarrassed, but I just love trying new things because it gives me joy. Like, before, it didn't. I felt like, okay, what if somebody what if I say the wrong thing? And eventually those voices will go away. They
Yeah.
won't be as loud.
And you know what? You never know what you're gonna find out of those new experiences. Like maybe you can find like your favorite niche that you never even like knew about or considered.
Right.
Yeah, like that the AMASV podcast is something that like I became passionate about because I had an idea one day and I decided to interview someone in film and I was passionate about film. And so here I am still to this day talking to amazing marketers like you.
If you have any, you know, want any recommendations of other people you could talk about, we could do this all day. So thank you so much for having me too.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for being here. So I'm curious, what is the biggest budget you've ever worked with that you can talk to me about?
Yeah, so I have to say, working in New York in the big ad agencies, um, the budgets are huge, right? So looking back, I worked on like The Craft, Procter and Gamble, Kool-Aid, Pulse brands, and in each of the brands had like 30 to 35 million dollars as a budget, right? And so in today's dollars, that would be like 100 million, right? So that's huge,
Yeah.
right? And so, but it was great because, first of all, it's scary. Like, oh my God, I'm the head of this team, like, spending all of this money. But you had such an amazing team of like researchers and assistants and other people that we all kind of did it collectively. And that the research that was available in the large agencies was amazing. But what I think was the most fun about that was how much you can really do with that much money. Like, you can look at multiple targets. So looking at Kool-Aid, for example, we were able to create our own comic books, right? With that. Talking about like more like PR earned and giving them out that way. And, we had like ads on the back of comic books and we were in all the TV shows and we were able to do multiple targets because when you have larger budgets, you can, target moms and you can target kids and you can do a lot of like the basics, like, television and out of home, but you can also do fun and out of the box and creative ideas. And we would always put like 10%, which 10% of 30 million is a lot, that we would just allocate to new and unique and things that we wanted to test out. And we were really encouraged at the time to try different things. So that's why I would talk to everybody. Like, any kind of salesperson that came, I would meet with them and I would just try to see, okay, does this make sense for Kool-Aid? Does this make sense for the Post cereals? And put it together. And what I loved about having so much money is that repetition and frequency of messaging is so important, that you're able to get people in multiple touch points and they're able to see that in the sales. And well, they don't necessarily go back and say, okay, this came from this and that. Overall, if their sales increased by whatever percentage or over exceeded, they knew that that plan was successful. So that, I love that time period because you could basically do everything that you wanted. And then you also had your wish list of, if I had extra money, if the sales do great, this is what I would add on. So that was great. I mean, didn't always get to work on those large budgets, but what we would do is we would have to make decisions. It's like, okay, if you don't have $30 million, okay, this is your wish list. What's your priority? Because then you have to focus on your core target and really hit them, in multi-platform. So you're really making a difference and moving the needle. So less money just means that you just have to make more decisions about how to best send you, just like, just a person. Like, if you have all the money in the world, you could do everything you want. But if you don't, then you have to say, well, my priority is to, live in a country home or to, go on this trip. You can't do everything. So it's the same thing with marketing.
Oh yeah, that's a really good analogy. I didn't really think of it that way. I just thought like big budget, big spending.
Yeah, but you're also, the thing about having big spending is that you're also held accountable, that if the needle doesn't move, then they're going to cut the spending because they're understanding that something else is going on with that marketing mix that's causing sales not to go up. Maybe it's the competition, maybe the product's not right, maybe they need to come up with a line extension. So there's a lot of things that have to go into the analysis, as to understand, why did this $30 million spend give them the amount of sales that they were predicting when they gave us the money.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Speaking of repetitiveness, it made me think about brands where I can remember like their what is it called? Not catchphrase, their tagline.
Their
That's what.
tagline.
So recently, I was singing a song about Daisy sour cream. So I mean, like repeating in my head. So I'm curious, what is like a brand tagline that you remember by heart because you've seen it so many times on TV?
Um, taglines don't really motivate me, interestingly enough. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just not, I'm so absorbed in it that it doesn't really stand out. But what does stand out to me to be interesting, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I went into radio sales, is music. Music to me is very powerful. And so I tend to love like the Pepsi commercials. And there was this one commercial, it was an insurance company, it was either Progressive or whatever, where they did this song, and it was like this beautiful kitchen, and they're doing whoop, there it is, whoop, there it is.
Yes.
My husband would go around singing that, whoop, there it is, and it's chakalaka laka chakalaka.
I remember that one.
And so that's not a tagline, but it's like a song. They took a song and they made it, because I know it's a famous group. Oh my God, my niece is gonna be upset. I don't know the name of the group, but they brought, and then there's the songs with Salt and Pepper. Push it real good. Like, I just love when people use like songs, like even from like the 80s and 90s, and they work into it, because there's research that shows that music has this emotional connection, and so I resonate to music in commercial. So see, it's interesting. So you have taglines, and so it's not like one size fits all, right? Everybody has a different thing. Yours is taglines, mine is the songs that gets me engaged into the commercial.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. And they had one with Backstreet Boys recently for a laundry commercial, I think. You remember that one too?
So
uh,
creative, right?
yeah. And like one big thing in digital marketing right now is in Reels and TikToks, they'll put in really popular songs. And I found myself the other day, like watching, random video, maybe like showing like, clothing. And it had a song. I wanted to keep watching it because I wanted to listen to the song. And I was like, oh, it's so powerful to keep people like engaged.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. But it's so funny, because whenever I do hear a song that a commercial, and I know they spend a lot of money for that commercial, and then you hear the song regular, it's just like, that's what the song is supposed to sound like, because you really associate it with the commercial,
Yeah.
with the brand, not with like the way the artist originally, created the song. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, they definitely tailor it to the commercial and jingles too. Like it just makes you remember the product. So just so you know, good food tastes better with a dollop of Daisy.
Oh, I do love that. And then Lizzo, Lizzo, she does like Tide, or like there's those commercials about spilling stuff like on the radio. I love those too, as well. But I do remember the doll from Daisy, now that you mention it. And
Yes.
I do have some in my refrigerator.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
I have some in my refrigerator.
Oh
The
yeah.
Daisy sour cream.
You're like I need it now because I can't stop thinking about it.
It's working.
Yeah, it is. So, what is your favorite project or campaign you worked on throughout your career?
So I have to say the first one for me was, so after I left the agency at Y&R, like once I moved out here to California, because finished my story, I actually quit. It's so funny. I remember, I'm very creative now, but at the time, I remember one thing that I got dinged on my review was that I wasn't creative enough. I wasn't thinking outside the box. And so I don't take criticism very well. So I'm like, what do you mean? Blah, blah. And so they actually sent me to creativity school, which was really interesting. And then I read all these books. And what I realized is that the reason why I wasn't creative at the time, I was working on this Fresh Step cat litter. I didn't have a cat, and I wasn't passionate about cat litter. And so it was hard for me to come up with ideas for cat litter when I just didn't care about it, right? And so I remember being in this meeting, and it was 2 hours, and I had a small part, and they talked about the labels. I said, I need to quit this job. Like, this is not for me. I'm not passionate about it anymore, and that's why I can't be creative. So I quit, and then my husband and I started our own business. Didn't like that. It was IT. So I went to this minority agency. It's called Carol H. Williams Advertising, which is focusing on targeting African American. And I like, oh my God, this is it. I love this. I'm going to be here forever. And what I loved about it is I'm African American, and just being able to utilize all my skills from media and marketing into ethnic targeting. And I was working on a Bank of America campaign for first time home buyers. And it was pretty, I don't remember what the budget was, but it was pretty big for a regional account. And I got one of those things, if you could do whatever you want. And so first time home buyers, we did research and found out that, a lot of people of color, low income, they don't have the financial information, education they need to make the right financial decisions. And sometimes they get taken advantage of. And Bank of America being, a paper bank, really wanted to focus on home ownership, looking at that as the key to financial empowerment. So I delved into all the research. And so to me, it was so awesome. I'm helping Bank of America sell home loans. Also helping a community that has a low percentage of home ownership. And I grew up, my parents were homeowners. I'm a homeowner. And so to me, this was the best of both worlds. I'm getting paid, I'm doing marketing, and I'm helping people. And we did this campaign where we worked with this African American financial advisor, and we had her create this radio show on one of the gospel stations in the Bay Area. And it came on like every week, and we did tips, and we bought her book and we handed it out. And so it was this full 360-degree focusing on financial empowerment and being measured by home loans and home ownership. And to this day, I'm still impressed with everything that we were able to do. Thank you, Bank of America.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I love projects like that are, like so personal and, help people. And I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like if you can do something that like impacts the community, like that's always something that I love to work on too.
Yeah, it's awesome. And there's a name for it. It's called like social marketing or social advertising, where you're working with not necessarily like buying or selling products, but behavior change. Like in the home loan, like they were actually selling home loans, but like I work a lot with Department of Health Services, or like you probably saw it with the COVID commercials, right? The ads, right? They were trying to get people to be vaccinated, right? And so that's like a behavior change model. And so it's measured the same way. You do research and people say, no, I'll never get this COVID shot. It's horrible. It's poison. And then you do commercials, and then you poll them 6 months later and like, oh, hey, maybe, blah, blah. So that's like behavior change. And I love doing things in that mode where you're helping people create better decisions and better behavior through marketing and advertising. So social marketing.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And I'm not sure if you know this, but I work on that COVID campaign with the California Department of Public Health.
Also, there's so many different ones. Like the ones you see on TV are different. That's the ones I hear on the R&B radio station or the hip hop. Like they tailor them to the specific target. So I think that they're just awesome.
Yes, yeah, very specific and trying to get those target markets. So, yeah, it's just outstanding. And, as you mentioned, the research just shows the result of it. So, fascinated all the time with, what we find.
Mm-hmm.
So, one last question for you. What advice would you give to someone wanting to pursue marketing profession?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. We at the end already? That's great. This went fast. Gosh, I'd say definitely connect with the AMA, join as many organizations, listen to podcasts, go to webinars, meet people, but also do some soul searching to understand where do you think you would fit in the whole marketing, umbrella. Because there's so many different things that you can go into. You can go into the creative side, the media side, account management, you can go on the media side. So I'd say definitely do research. And then going back to, do what was I saying, the strength finders, if you get a chance to really understand what your strengths are. When you do strength finders, if you haven't, it also gives you tips on what careers work best based on your strengths. Like one of the things that came up, and I kind of do a little, is producer, because of like I like to do a lot of things, and I'm very creative, and I'm good at making order out of chaos, being a producer is a good strength for me, because it's like I love seeing things that are messy, and I have a vision of how I want to make it neat, right? And so just diving into your strengths or your passions, and then understanding that whatever you're researching, it doesn't have to be a one and done. You can do a lot of different things until you find, that right job or those right sets of jobs that you can kind of, try out.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
lots of research, lots of exploration, and then just buying books and going to seminars. And once you're in the industry, you start meeting people, because that to me is the best. Like once I started getting in, I said, "Oh, what do you do here? What do you do there?" You can kind of understand where you fit in with your skill set and who do you like to work with.
yeah, absolutely. And I really, truly like your advice about, taking the mess and organizing it and understanding the big picture, and also having confidence in yourself and knowing that you can do it.
Right, like that you can do it. And I think that's my thing with creative. Like at first, to be honest with you, I didn't work as well as creative people, because I think they felt that I was too pushy, or like maybe not listening enough. And so then I said, okay, well, I need to listen more. And so when you listen to people, and then even if you don't do exactly what you said, there's, and I know this is what you wanted, but we can't have the logo be so small because the client is paying for it. And I've had like, this is like actual conversations that I've had, like with Bank of America. Like, can you make it just a little bit bigger? Like, no, then it's going to take over the ad. Like, I understand, but can we just make it a little bit bigger since they're paying for it? And it was just like, not like saying like, are you stupid? Like, of course the ad has to be like just like understanding where somebody else is coming from. I think I've learned, over the years to be sensitive, particularly like with creative people that tend to be a little bit more sensitive, like for me to gear my messaging to them and not just to what I'm trying to accomplish
Yeah, and doing your best for the client. That's
for
awesome.
the client. But sometimes that can get you in trouble inside an agency, because I was looked at like being the client dictator. Like, okay, Maria's going to tell us what the client wants, but not necessarily looking out for their interest. And so I had to kind of step back a little bit. And sometimes I would push back on the client and say, my team is saying, blah blah blah, and even if they didn't go for it, the team appreciated me speaking for them, because when you're an account manager, you're the voice of the creative people, so you have to be conscious of that, when you're talking to the client. And just because the client pays the money, that doesn't mean you have to say yes to everything that they want to do if it's not in the best interest of the agency or for the final product. Because remember, they're not creative people, they are paying for it, but they're hired an agency because of what we do, and so we always have to remember that.
Yeah, it's great to have, like sort of that voice on the team, and an ally to push things forward. So I really admire that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Maria, I really wanted to thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Best of luck to you in your career, and really admire all of your success so far. So thanks so much again. Really appreciate it.
You too, and same to you, Hannah. And anytime, love to be able to have coffee sometime soon with you. Next time I'm in Sacramento.
Thank you so much. That sounds good. Really appreciate it. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.